There we go. All right. Let's see. Howdy, 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 folks. Cody here with To Walk with Giants, and joining me is the ever wonderful, enigmatic, charismatic, this guy.
Synonyms, that is me, Christopher Messick. Happy to be here, aka Laguna Munta. I hope everybody's having a nice Christmas Eve.
So do I. So do I. And we're here tonight to talk about, as we usually do, another giant, a concept known as compromise. So,
Yes.
what do you think about compromise?
Okay, wow. Jumping right in.
Well, we got
Let me
to.
just
We got
Right.
to.
I guess that's what we're here for, right?
Right?
To talk
Why?
about it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess when I think of compromise, I guess it's, supposed to be a sort of giving up of something and somebody else gives up something if you're in an arrangement together and there's sort of a middle ground met where each party sacrifices something. And the first thing I thought of when I thought of compromise, the real first thought that surfaced without a lot of effort was the fact that basically all of us as individuals, we have to compromise ourselves to
That's the other way of
exist
it.
in society.
That's very true. Very true.
Um,
I had this is another one where I didn't think of it from that angle, where you think this is a compromising photograph, that kind of angle. I didn't think of it like
right.
that. And that's how I think of
Yeah.
it when you're talking about that. Is you are exposing and twisting yourself to fit in.
Yeah, and we have to do that because the world isn't going to twist and reshape itself to fit us. There are instances where we can maybe manipulate things and suit it to us better in small ways in our own lives maybe, but I think in the grand scheme we really have to compromise a lot of ourselves to fit into the society as a whole.
Oh, I 100% agree. The other angle of compromise for me is the way to the I guess the aspirational version of compromise to me is when you find a path that everybody wins, but they may not all win big. That's to me a lot of compromise. So you get one person gets one candy bar, the other person wants that candy bar. There's a lot of different ways to solve that, and one of them is, well, we split that candy bar, and that was a compromise. Made both
Right.
folks happy, even though neither of them got a full candy bar. Right?
Yeah, and I really think that that's one of the major things we face every day, just living life.
Absolutely.
We all have to just take our little piece of the candy bar, hopefully, if we can get it.
Yeah, that's the big one too. That's the other compromise. Is a lot of it. We make those compromises, and the other party does not, and then
Right.
we just lose.
Yeah, and
That's a tough one.
the there's a moment I was thinking about referring to compromise in the film Excalibur.
Oh,
And it's early in the film after Uther Pendragon has received Excalibur from Merlin. Merlin goes to the Lady of the Lake and he gets it and he gives it to Uther. And he gives it to Uther to heal, not to hack. But so they meet the Duke of Cornwall. I think that's the right guy. At this river, and Uther and his men are on one side, and the Duke and his men are on the other side. And so basically, he shows the sword, and they all kind of respect the power of Excalibur, and a lot of men bow, and they're just kind of in awe of this moment. And so Uther says to the Duke, he says, the land from here to the sea will be yours so long as you enforce the king's will. And the Duke, he yells back, he says, if I yield, what will you yield? And Uther goes, me yield? Because he's got Excalibur. Why would he yield? And then Merlin kind of he goes, he has given. Now you must. And I thought that was a great moment of compromise and the clear resistance to compromise when in a position of great power.
coming off of that, and I was thinking this earlier, just the concept of compromise overall, right? I think compromise is oh my the most prevalent path to peace. It is the number one way to avoid, let alone escape the possibility of actual conflict. It's recognizing a problem before it becomes conflict and finding a way to adjust expectations and desires to align and find a resonating path forward. And I guess we would usually call that peace.
Yeah, and again, this is something that happens every day. If you bump into somebody on the street, it could escalate into a knife fight, if the circumstances were proper. And there's a lot of compromise there, and hopefully the person that on the other end is going to be an understanding and reasonable person who understands that there's this give and take between all of us, and it won't escalate, because most people don't want to get into an altercation. Most people don't want to get into a brawl because they know what it could cost them. It could cost them physical harm, legal issues, death. There's a lot of compromise. People will compromise a lot not to be hurt.
Oh, very much so. Threat is a big part of why compromise, happens. And as you were talking about with Uther, he didn't feel threatened, right? He felt like,
Nope.
why should I?
Exactly.
And of course the wizard was there to impart that magic. To compromise this stream a little bit, who the hell are we, and why should people be listening to us?
Well, we are To Walk with Giants, Christopher Messick and Cody Fernandez.
Yes.
I'm an original musician. I play music. I write and record my own music. I've released 2 albums independently. Play a bit of rock and roll, a little bit of it's kind of a mixed genre thing, but in the rock vein. And I've been writing and recording music for a long time now. I've been playing guitar for nearly 20 years, and I've been writing songs most of that time. And that's primarily what I do. Is I am an artist and a lyricist, and that's where a lot of my philosophical ideas come to light, is through my music and my expressions therein. What about you, Cody?
Well, I don't do any of that. No. What I do is very similar. I try and seek, again, wisdom, what we're trying to do on this channel, and this is one of those expressions through self-expression, self-exploration, artistic interpretation, networking, all those wonderful compromises we make when we're thrown into this world, and trying to find the spots where we won't compromise in some ways, the things that need to be said that we feel need to be said, or the things that we don't understand that need to be understood, and we can't walk away or exchange that for something else. Finding those important things, and I've done that through a bunch of different mediums of art, but my most popular is the comic book series Jack Iron Steel Cowboy and the comic book imprint Ironverse Comics. And that's been a wonderful experience that has provided so many different things. And working in artistry in general, particularly with other folks, involves a lot of compromise. So I got a little bit to say on compromise. But overall, I think we're also just unique individuals from a unique place. We're both born, well, relatively, both raised in the mountains of northern New Mexico out here in Taos. Folks may have heard of it. I don't know. It's a very unique place if you ever want to look it up. It is out of a lot of places. People hear Santa Fe, Albuquerque, and if they even know about New Mexico, and that's one too. A lot of people, that's a state, but that's always a good one. A huge conglomeration of different cultures meet here in a way they don't meet anywhere else.
And it's a very small town, very rural, and so we don't have we have one Walmart, and it's not a super Walmart.
We spend a little bit more time alone. Let's just say that.
Yes.
No, but nonetheless, I think if you find us interesting, check out our other work again. Please look up Laguna Munta. Wonderful art. Big fan. And if you have the time, check out Ironverse Comics and give it a read. Unique, wonderful, absolutely unique, wonderful expressions of art from 2 unique and dare I say wonderful individuals. Now that I've compromised our
Uh,
stream with some shilling.
no, I think it was very good, but I think this is a perfect opportunity because you and I are basically on opposite ends of the spectrum. I
Oh,
work alone
that's true.
and you work with a team. So
Yeah.
talk about your art and working with a team and how compromise fits into all of that.
It's funny because I spend most of my time, quote unquote, alone. I spend it with animals and things as part of a pack. Is usually, my a lot of my experience also is I work with dogs. That's been my professional work for almost a decade now. But when it comes to art, I've always been like way happier in a collaborative sense. Which again, that's kind of funny because I know you spend a lot more time around folks just in general. Um,
Yeah.
but uh, so when it comes to art, I mean that's everything when you're working in a team. There's always angles you need to compromise, particularly if your goal, you have a guiding star that you need to reach. You can't worry so much about the pathway there. Because you can't be so arrogant as to think you know every step that you haven't even taken yet. Um, and so I've been very lucky to work with some extreme talents that I could respect from their art level just from the beginning. It's like, oh wow, I get to work with this individual. But also from a personal level, these were people who understood what I wanted to do with the work and very much wanted to do that work with me. And so understanding that and having that initial mutual interest and application of skills and artistry, and you cannot discount how much hard work artistry is. And I respect hard work. I'm a person who respects that work. um, and so I think a big part of satisfactory and goodwill based compromise, not just, I mean, you could have business relationships where you are compromising all the time. You're the one who's like, well, if I accept your rule, then what do I get? Instead of asking what you get, you just accept the rule and expect them to do something for me. I have met those people, and they tend to have the worst experiences in collaborative art because they don't have their guiding star, their footing, their grounding, and their the basis on which the box in which they can pick things out of to compromise with. Um, and I've been, again, very lucky to work with a lot of people who had a good understanding of their box. They knew where they could budge and where they shouldn't. They knew they never gave more than they should. They never gave less than they should. And that is all very, I don't want to say unusual because I've seen a lot of very successful and great collaborative efforts, but I think it is, for one, not spoken highly enough, and for two, it is harder for some people than others. Particularly, the more controlling you are, the harder it is to compromise. Again, the more clear your vision, sometimes the harder it is to waver from that, and that makes compromise more difficult. And I've had a very clear vision of something that is very wide and very adaptable and very honestly, it's survival, right? It knows what it needs to do to be itself while being able to adapt and survive and take a couple whacks and get back up and keep moving. Um, Not everybody's visions are like that, and you get some wonderful artistic expressions from outdoors. Folks who have that very clean, clear, strong vision. But usually, there's a lot more money behind those folks. If you try doing that in comics or in a small indie band, it could be very, very rough on your collaborators, and that's if they stick around. But yeah, that's kind of been my experience with compromise. I think it is a wonderful tool in the kit. You just, as many of the topics we've spoken to, you've got to find your own personal experience and understanding of it and figure out how to use that tool best for what you're trying to accomplish.
I agree. Yeah.
So let me see here.
So I would say, I
There
guess,
we
in
go.
my experience with
Hmm.
my art, because I have worked with other people in the past, and I try to work with people still. um I've had to learn to be better at compromising, and I think what it comes I think initially the difficulty in compromising for me, especially when I was younger, I would come up with an idea, and maybe I wasn't. You kind of have to prop yourself up artificially. You sort of have to create this confidence, and you have to manufacture it. I mean, I guess you could argue confidence is manufactured, but it's kind of this cardboard cutout confidence that you have to create, especially when you're starting in your art. You have to believe in yourself, unrealistically almost, I think, just to keep going. And that can lead to um it can lead to being unwilling to compromise because there's a sort of protective nature that you develop because you're so strongly trying to hold this cardboard cutout up of this new fresh idea, this new thing. It's just a facade at this point, and maybe you can build something up around it given time and skill. So so when I was first trying to write songs, criticism was difficult to take because I'm still building this facade, and I'm still it's not even finished yet. So taking criticism and compromising and trying to incorporate other people's thoughts and ideas into it was something I would just outright reject. And I think that's why initially I had a difficult time with it. Also, there is a clear vision for a lot of things. I have a clear vision for a lot of things that I want to happen, and how I want things to come across. And that can manifest itself in knowing exactly what you want, and it can manifest itself in knowing exactly what you don't want. You hear something, you say, "Well, that's not it." Maybe you can't put your finger on it, but it's out there. It's an outline. There's this ethereal sense to it, and you're just trying to harness it, and you're trying to bring it into this tangible form. And compromising early on, I think, when you're beginning as an artist or a creator in whatever phase, I think that's the most difficult time to compromise. And I was having this recently where I'm writing new material and coming up with new ideas, and I was inviting new thoughts in from friends and family, and then I was like, no, wait, no, I just actually, you know what, let's hold off on this. This is still kind of in its infancy. I shouldn't have asked for feedback just yet. There's not enough here yet. I'm still trying to figure out what this is.
Oh, absolutely. And on that note, exactly what you're talking about. I think also the younger you are and the less you have found a true sense, a solid, grounded sense of identity,
Yeah.
the much harder it is to compromise because you don't even have anything really to compromise. Again, as you spoke of
You don't even
the
know what you
facade.
are yet.
Yeah, exactly. And so you're trying to figure that out, trying to will that into existence at the same time as trying to survive social groups and all these different, very human. I call them games. It's a little insulting because they're more important than that. But that term will work for my what we're talking about.
Dances
There you go. That's a little bit more it's kind and it's a bit more subtle and it's more true. Dances, that'll work perfect.
speaks to the ritual of it also.
Exactly, that's the bit, right? Like, again, if I use the term, yeah, games can fun. There's a lot of ritual in games. There's all these different things, but it's also got that like, it's not worth anything, and that's not true. A dance is very much so. Um, and so that's always been a bit, and I've spent a lot of time when I was younger just avoiding those dances in particular because I didn't know how to read them. I didn't know how to do the moves, so it's just like, okay, just plow forward, just survive, learn. And so by the time I got to really desiring to throw out a stronger, more personal expression within art, I was very open to figuring out how to get it done to a level I wouldn't have much younger. In fact, I gone back to that younger material, and it is terribly derivative because you're trying to figure yourself out. So you grab from these things you like and all these different like angles, and sometimes it's a flattering grab, and sometimes it's a very like that's a clone grab. And all of those things are uncertain until you've actually lived life for a good chunk of time and you figured out like this is my emotions, this is how I work, this is the rhythm, this is how, until you understand yourself enough to be. You're talking about confidence. There's quite a few different types of confidence. I've heard it defined so many different ways. Um, I'm going to use the term self-assured, but that also has
Yeah, that's a good
been
one.
defined differently because that comes with a bit more tinge of arrogance to it. Um, but maybe self-reassured is closer, right? You've experienced things, you've fallen, you've gotten back up, right? Um, Confidence tends to be built from surviving failure more than from uh, winning.
Maybe it's just a self knowledge because
Exactly.
at the end of the day, because you know what you're capable of, you slowly learn your own capabilities, and then you just build on that. So that's just where confidence. I mean, like I've been thrown into situations where I didn't really know what to. Well, I've been thrown into situations where I've never been in before,
Mm.
but I've had moments like that in my past where I was thrown into those situations, so I've become comfortable in new situations where I can just kind of do things on the fly. But I think with art in particular, as I've grown older and more competent
There you go.
in my skills and my tools, uh, there becomes more knowledge of what my own capabilities, and then more confidence behind that. And then when you've established proof, you have a
Yes.
stack of comics to prove that you what you're capable of.
Yeah.
You know, I've
Yeah.
got a library. I've got a library of songs to prove what I'm capable of.
Yes.
It took me 2 years to finish Chuck, and I think back and I says, "Well, look at that. I've got follow through. I spent 2 years on that,
Yes.
and I was sure it was never going to be done. I was confident that I was never going to finish that damn CD. I
Well,
love it. That's not the damn CD, but
well,
you know what I mean.
there's so many people. There's so many people who find that extra. You know, again, they live in that false confidence and they jump from job to job, art to art, all these different things. Project to project would be more wide, right? And they always feel like, oh, this is the thing, and they're going to do that, and then it falls off. They lose interest. And some people are built like that. Some people don't have the I'm not gonna say don't have follow through. They just haven't found a thing that drives them to the follow through. I think that tends to be
Yeah, and I
the
and I
deal.
did that many times in my youth. I tried a lot of different things that just went nowhere.
Exactly. I mean, I've tried so many different arts, and what I found is the follow through for me is to the completion. It doesn't even need to be competent per se. Did I gain something out of the expression? Did I gain something out of the interaction with the medium? That's
Yeah,
always been my thing. And once my focus had shifted to that, again, I can be confident jumping into near anything simply because I know I will come out the other end of it with experience, with more knowledge, with
yeah.
that self knowledge. It's particularly new things. Um, so we've hit about the 20-minute mark, a little after, and I want to remind folks if you're liking what we're talking about, if you got something to say, please let us know in chat. Hit those comments, and if you really want to support us, please share, like, and kind of nudge that machine called the algorithm a little bit for us. We'd love to have a bunch of folks listening and interacting, but if we can't have that, enough for me at least, it's enough to know that you're here for us. We appreciate it
We
because we're here
appreciate
for
that.
you.
Well, I have some thoughts that I've written down regarding
Oh,
compromise,
oh,
and this is something I thought we could have a little fun chewing on.
yeah.
So, does the art compromise itself to the artist who's unable to express it fully or correctly? If we think of art as a thing that comes to us, a lot of artists, and we've talked about this too, where it's just we're in this mode of sort of channeling, where I've had this where I feel like the song's written itself, and I was just there. All I had to do was hold the pencil.
Yes. Particularly, folks will recognize this. Maybe more mainstream is known as the flow state. Gamers will experience it. It's that slight disconnect from consciousness and absorption into a medium. It can be a films will do it pretty well sometimes too as well. It's just when you kind of escape the bounds of space and time for a little bit, and you're just
But
acting. It's a wonderful
yes,
thing.
exactly. But I was thinking about that, and I thought about how many songs or pieces that I've worked on that were compromised because of maybe my imagination or my lack thereof, or my technology,
I
or
again, I would argue every piece of art was a compromise between the medium,
it
the
it
skill of the
is.
artist, and the artist's intention,
Yes.
right, and their
But I thought that
imagination.
was an interesting thought,
Yeah. Oh,
that
absolutely.
the that the art compromises itself, so that this artist, this crude artist can can express itself.
The yeah, I would phrase it, at least how I'm understanding it, is like the ideal compromises itself into a piece of art.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the art as almost like a conscious entity that has
Mm,
visited us, and it says, "Hey, there's here's this person that can bring me into this world." And this is just I just went there one day,
yeah,
and I just thought it was an interesting concept. It's just, if this art just comes to you through the ether, it chooses you and says, "Oh, this person's going to bring me. This person's going to let me exist. It's going to filter me into existence." And well, he's not Michelangelo, you know. He's not Michelangelo Batio. Ah, but it's okay. I will compromise myself through this artist. And that's a pretty out there thought, but it occurred to me, and I wanted to share it with you
oh,
because
absolutely.
it got the wheels turning.
Ah, man, I could to get on the wavelength that you're going there.
Yeah,
I
I know.
have to go to the more
Got there.
fifth dimensional, out of space time, abstract, all existent space, and
Very abstract thought.
I don't know. I don't know if we could really go there on this one, but
It's okay.
it
I
very
just
much
wanted to put it
is.
out there.
Very much, because I totally get you. I'm a guy who thinks that there is a grand expression, something that is all, right. I think there is a concept of all that includes nothing and all of these fun things, and so there's a lot there. It's just one of those whacked out kind of concepts. I don't know. I don't know.
It's it's hard to grasp,
Yes.
and I knew that when I wrote it down, but it made sense to me in this. It makes sense in my own head, and I know it's a strange one, but yeah, I mean, I've compromised basically every song I think I've written. There's been a form of compromise in it due to lack of ability or imagination, too much imagination, not enough imagination. And I've heard it said that no art is ever finished; it's only abandoned.
Yep. I would totally agree with that. Um, or it's made to suit its purpose, which is a lot more common these days. At least if you're making money as an artist, right? Is it's not even like so
Right.
much abandoned. It's just like, well, this is what was asked of me.
And
Um,
this is the deadline.
yes, exactly. And so that is a huge compromise on art. That is a consistent and strong one, particularly if you want to live off your art, right? Um, you could spend an incredibly talented whatever medium, sculptor, painter, musician, whatever, could spend their entire life trying to perfect a single song, never make a dime off of it, and still never finish it with that intent, right? With the seeking of that ideal, that perfect expression of their bit, and they could be incredibly talented, have every possible tool, and still not be able to do it. I think that's a lot of the catharsis in art for me comes from that eventual sense of letting. It's not so much letting go as letting be, right. Finding
Don't
a
mess with it.
again, we talk about compromise as a path to peace. That's what it is, right. It's the same thing.
Yeah,
Having the peace with
yeah,
that art, you can let it go. It's kind of letting it go, but you're letting it be. You're letting it, like, that's as far as I can take you.
yeah. You stop tampering with it. You stop trying to form it into what you want it to be, and you just kind of like, well, this is what it's gonna be. There it is. Because I don't know about you, but I can kind of be tortured by an idea, in the sense that it not that I wake up in agony or anything like that, but it just won't leave me alone. And it's not a constant thing, but if I move away from it for too long, I start really, it just affects my mood,
Mm,
and it really kind of, it can be this distracting force. And I think there is a compromise there. It says, hey, if you give this piece time and you work on it, give it a couple hours of your day, give it some of your energy, it'll leave you alone for a while. It's kind of this, monster. It's kind of a friendly monster, that I wrestle. I don't know. It haunts me, but it's also a companion. You know,
yeah.
I think it's about, if it's left unchecked, kind of like desire, as we were talking about. It can just
Yes.
it can morph into something negative. It can morph into a responsibility as opposed to a passion. You know.
Oh, absolutely. You can compromise yourself to this work so much that everything else is literally compromised. You're not working on anything else. You're not working with your friends or your coworkers. You're not paying attention to your significant other. All these different things that that's I think compromise. A unhealthy form of compromise is kind of similar to an unhealthy form of desire, and you call that obsession, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Or
and
I'll give you all of myself for
yes.
just a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the big one. So if folks haven't yet, and you are watching this one for whatever reason, again, Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays, whatever works for you. But we would love you to go check out our previous episodes on desire, hope, and authenticity. I think they are wonderful conversations, and we would love to hear your thoughts on them.
Yeah, and we try not to touch on the same thoughts often. We try to keep it fresh, and oftentimes we might reference something else, but we try to keep it. We try to keep things fresh in these
We
casts.
do indeed. You will sometimes. What we've done so far, which is I think has been kind of neat, is one topic has led to another throughout the discussion. So there will be relations, but these are big concepts. That's why the channel's called what it is. So please let us know your thoughts on, in this case, compromise down below or in chat right now if you would be so kind. But overall, I think I think compromise has been a net good for the survival of mankind. It's a big, weird one, but overall, I think it has been a necessity, no question.
I would
Um,
agree.
and in that necessity, I think it out of a lot of the ones that we've spoken about, we try to hit both negative and positive connotations. Most of these are, again, we're walking with giants. We're trying to figure out these, well, not figure out, but explore these very large concepts, and so usually they
Exactly.
have multiple shades of understanding and expression, and we're lucky enough that somehow human language has been able to kind of pinpoint a sphere of this thing so we can at least label it. um,
Right.
but and that's a compromise too. Language, every word's a compromise, right?
Oh, and that's something
My
I thought
god.
about too. Um, every time I write a song, every word I choose is a compromise.
Yep, I would say every
Because
every word I've written
because
as well.
because I'm not choosing every other word I could have chosen. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. You could say the same with the brushstroke, the colors you choose, the notes you're
Yeah.
playing,
Yeah.
the music you listen to beforehand, right? The even the media you consume, right? You compromise. You're experiencing one thing to another instead of, and there is some dangerous compromises. We've hit that as well, where they're not mutually in some aspect fulfilling. Um, I mean, when it's relationship to media, I think that's a lot tougher. I do know there are some very parasitic relationships within media that are very one sided compromise either way. Um, but we keep hitting it, but it is like it is just another tool that experience allows us to understand how to apply. Very much
Yeah,
like
and I
desire, very much like hope, and I think authenticity may not have, but well, no, because there is too much authenticity sometimes.
right. Yeah, and I think as I've grown older, I've gotten better at figuring out what I'm willing to compromise, when I'm willing to compromise, and I think, well, oftentimes, especially when I was younger, I would, I'd be at work in the service industry dealing with just customers, and they would say something, and because we all have our echo chambers we exist in to a certain degree, and they would say something that it just kind of an offhand thing that in their circle maybe it's just agreed upon, you know, and so they say it like they just kind of throw it away like it's nothing. And when I was younger, I would just be like, "Oh, well, yeah, whatever, sure, have a good one," get him out the door. Just compromising there, being like, "Okay, well, I'll just let you say that, and I won't. I'm not gonna agree with you, but I'm not gonna disagree with you. Just gonna let's just move these things along." I found that as I've gotten older, I can't really do that as well, and I just have a hard time when people say things that they just assume that I agree with. I really have to say something now and clarify and let them know that I don't agree with them, because there are a lot of compromises I'm not willing to make. And I think silence often people assume is some sort of agreement. Maybe that's just my take, but I would often just speak up when I disagreed, just to make it clear that I disagreed, just so there wouldn't be this assumption, because that was a compromise I was no longer willing to make because of whatever subject, whatever they happened to say. I was like, oh, I'm not going to agree with this. I actually have to say something about this.
Well, that goes to I don't know what I was watching, but it's about how you thinking about social interactions, and there's two ways people usually do it. It's either um, will they like me, and then the more tends to be more healthy one is do I like them.
Hmm.
And we have a lot of hard times. We tend to have a harder time, especially again when you have less confidence and all these things. You want to know if they like you because that's just it's fulfilling, right?
Yeah, it's
Um,
just
and,
makes sense.
and you're not in a way it's still asking for this input when do I like them? You're asking for their input, but instead of it being a force out of your control, it's a force that's within yours, right? Um,
Yeah, and sorry.
and it's just smarter to deal with what you actually can deal with.
Yeah, and I think I've just reached the point where I don't want someone to like me because of who they think I am,
Mm,
or who I've allowed them to think I am.
that's an important one.
I'd rather be hated for who I am than loved for who I'm not. That's a compromise I'm not willing to make. I'm not willing to compromise myself for love. And Don Miguel Ruiz, in his book, The Mastery of Love, he talks about this concept of a magic kitchen, and it relates to this. So the idea is if you have a magic kitchen in your house, Cody,
Mm-hmm.
where you can cook anything you can imagine,
Oh,
any meal you want,
oh man.
everything is there. It's a
Oh,
magical kitchen, anything you can conceive of. Somebody
right.
knocks on your door and they have a pizza and they say, "Hey, Cody, I'll give you this pizza. All you have to do is let me control you." And Cody says, "Well, actually, beat it, pal. I've got a magic kitchen." And it's this idea of self-love and this love that comes from within. And as long as you have that, nobody can control you because you love yourself. And I think that says a lot about compromise, because I have done it, and it's people do it. They compromise themselves for the love of others.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
that's something I just refuse to do anymore.
And that's healthy. I'll do it when there's two times I'll do it. It's when somebody's valuable and we have a history and we have something I respect and it's already built, right? I'm not compromising to achieve that. I'm compromising to maintain it.
Yeah,
And
and I
then I
think
will
it
do it.
involves
I will do it for people I judge that like I don't need. I have no value. You have no value.
right,
Um,
right.
and like me expanding our interaction at all has it's actually a negative value. Um,
Yeah.
those are
And
the
I
two
and I
times I'll
don't
do it.
mean to say that I'm not willing to do it in small little pieces
Yeah.
like
Oh
that.
yeah.
There are times when I will bite my tongue
Mhm.
because I know it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
You know, my friend told me years ago, he said, not that I'm right all the time, but how often do we feel right? Pretty often, usually.
Mm.
Uh, he says, get being right gets old.
Oh, very
Like,
much does.
and not that I'm right all the time, but I know I will there are small things I will do. I will bite my tongue. I will not say this because I know it's not the right moment. I know it's going to make things worse
Yeah.
for like you said, relationships that are meaningful. But I won't put on this facade. I won't pretend to be somebody I'm not when meeting somebody new
No,
to
that's
get
important.
them to like me. I just it just I I refuse. I almost I almost get this reverse kind of overreaction where I maybe just act a little uglier than I normally do just so they get an idea of like this is like me at my worst. Can you handle a little bit of this? This is
Mm.
kind of who I really am. How do you feel about this? Does that make sense? Do you know what I mean?
I do, and I
And that's
know.
not all the time.
No, of course not. You couldn't. That would be that would not be healthy. But
That's if I feel I'm being like pushed down or like repressed.
well, and I was going to say put into a box. That was the term I was going to say. When
Yeah.
they're implying or trying to write a thought to you, I totally understand that. For me, again, I really have to have some person has to have any form of value to me for me to even give two shits about that. Um,
Right.
but I mean sub form of value, even if it's just like, oh, I like this, I like talking to this person. Oh, now they said this. Oh, then authenticity needs to come in, and then you can judge what they are as a person. That sometimes not compromising and going and leaning into that conflict is the healthiest thing you can do. Um, and it's far more healthy than compromising to it and then allowing them to put you into a box. And again, as you said, you use the term control for the magic kitchen, and that's allowing them to again forge an idea, a shape, a sculpture of you that is it's a lie. It's a facade. It's got no. It's
Yeah, and
hollow,
I don't
hollow.
yeah, and I don't want people to think I'm better than I am either. I don't want the
Mm-hmm.
positive effects of it. I don't want to be
That's true.
ingratiated to somebody as a saint, you know?
Yeah.
Like if somebody's introducing me and they're trying to ingratiate me and they're saying all these things that maybe like too nice almost or something like that, I don't want that. I would rather just I'm a normal person and I sometimes I do good things and sometimes I don't do good things. Sometimes I just yeah, I don't know. That I lost my train of thought there, but
No, I get you. No, again, this it's funny. It ties back to the importance. I'm sure we discussed it. I don't remember everything we discussed, but I'm sure we discussed it with authenticity as having a footing and a basis. And I think that's a big one. Is experience and the self knowledge and trying new things, meeting new people, all these different things. You figure out how to use the tools in your kit, and compromise is a wonderful one. It's one that is far more useful than it is detrimental, in my opinion, compared to a few other topics we've discussed. But as any of them, it can be very unhealthy, and you have to figure out who you are. And anybody who thinks they have themselves all figured out also is very much not figured anything out.
right.
And that's the bit. You got to humble yourself to every encounter. Again, so if that person's that's a great what you're talking about is a great litmus test to see how authentic that person is. If you can actually hit
Yeah.
hit an idea, or remind them that you don't know me, and they respond to that in a good way or a way that you understand or is communicative, then that lack of compromise led to a better compromise.
A deeper understanding of one another too,
Yes. Yes.
warts and all, you
Yes.
know? Yeah, and I've had interactions with people who are severely deep and very connected to spiritual thinking and are just older people who've been around, and I could just tell because I would say things that are just basic interactions that are just nothingness. We just spit at each other all day. Hey, how's it going? Oh, pretty good. How are you? How's your day? Oh, nice weather. That sort of
Mhm.
thing. And I knew that
I
they could
can.
detect the lack of authenticity. And I just felt like I was naked after I said that stuff. Because I was just being looked through because it was nothing, you know? And being around those type of people really helped me to realize, well, I should probably speak authentically, and when I'm nervous, I should just shut up, because that's usually what happens when people start rambling on, is because they're nervous and they just can't shut up.
Well,
And I
sometimes
would do
that's
that.
it. Sometimes it's a comfort thing. It's
Right.
some people's patter, like, oh, can you keep up with my patter and keep that going, and then evolve it into something else. That's another big one. Is like, well, can this lead to a comfortability that could allow these more authentic and against deeper concepts to emerge? And not
Yeah.
everybody can do that. Not everybody wants to deal with it, and they don't have to.
Right.
I think there's value in it, but they don't have to. Um,
Yeah, and there are people that I know that that's my relationship with them. It's very like surface level. It's very, how's the weather today? And that's okay. That's just how it's going to
well,
be.
and that's a functional compromise.
I will make that compromise
Yes.
because because usually I've tried.
Mm,
Usually I've tried to get in there and dig deeper, and if there's not a response, I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well,
exactly.
perhaps the river is only this deep."
And it might just be that deep with you, because who knows why,
Right.
right? You never,
Right.
you can't.
Maybe they think I'm that guy. This guy he's so surface
All he
level.
does is talk about exactly, right? And you can't know. You can't.
How dare you make me think about my actions? How dare you?
Well, that's a compromise we have to make with ourselves as well.
That's
Um,
that's good.
that's the
That's good.
big one. That's a massive one that I personally, that's a very important one. I think
Yeah.
self knowledge is a lot of compromising of your ideal to your reality to your forward motion. If you don't have those three, you get lost pretty quick. Um,
Yeah, and I had some thoughts, and I don't think I'm not breaking new ground with these thoughts, but it was about healthy compromise with yourself.
oh, good. All right.
Um, this is just essentially, it's like, oh well, and I have this frequently where I have a task that I need to complete. Like, let's say I need to come home and work out, and maybe I don't have the energy, but it's kind of like, well, if you do it, you can have a piece of pecan pie. Yeah, you
Yep.
know?
Yep. 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 Yep.
If you go home and if you because I notoriously don't like rehearsing.
Mm.
I had a lot of fun rehearsing with you the other day, by the way.
Oh, it's always fun. That's
That was
that's how
that was a
I
lot of
like
fun.
like have enjoyed music my whole life. Is like it's a
Well,
communal
I
thing.
enjoy playing with other people, but I often just get so frustrated playing stuff over and over and over.
Oh,
But
who
it was
doesn't?
really
Who
fun the
doesn't?
other day,
When you're by
so just
yourself, I'm
bear
glad.
that in mind.
I'm glad.
But
Well,
yeah,
I
so
did too.
if I need to come home and rehearse by
Yes.
myself, it's like, "Oh, Chris, if you go home and rehearse, like, maybe you play a game for an hour after or watch a movie or something. Just get what you need to do done." And I love playing music and I love writing it. I love performing it, but I really just get sick of rehearsing.
Oh, I
So
understand that. It's
that's a
practice, and
compromise
practice is
there.
usually rigid, and you've done it before. It's not new and exciting. It's all these different things, right? And that's
But I'm so
100%. You have
thankful.
to. The what you're kind of talking about is the relationship between compromise and incentive. And that is always like
Right.
a major bit of compromises. There has to be an incentive for both parties, or in this case, one party, to do
Yeah.
it right. Well,
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 usually
in that case, I would still say there's two parties, because there's the part of you that wants to do it and knows they should, and there's the part of you that does not want to because
oh
X,
yeah,
Y, Z.
there's the two
So
guys
yeah,
in here.
to be
Yeah.
fair. So it's still, you have to find an incentive that works for both parties, even if it's not. Again, you want to find the win for everybody, even if it's not the Super Bowl victory, right? It's not the big thing
Right.
for anybody.
Well, a big incentive for me is think about what an idiot you're going to feel like if you can't play your songs properly in front of these people for this show we have.
Shame as an incentive. It's a good one. It's a good one.
Sort of, yeah. It works for
Embarrassment,
me.
whatever term you want
Yeah,
to use.
wasting people's time.
Yeah,
Also,
yeah. No, I get you.
and
Well, degrading all the effort you put into this
well, if
thing as
everybody's looking at
well.
you, you better
You know.
do something. Like,
Exactly.
So that's a really good. I can push past my lack of desire to rehearse and do it. Sometimes it's harder than others, but if I'm rehearsing for a live show,
Mm-hmm.
that incentive is always there. And if it's for something like what we got coming up, which we haven't announced yet, so we'll keep it on the DL.
Oh,
But
okay.
it's about not wasting people's time.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
it's about hey, because if it's my if they're my songs,
Yep.
we're working on I better show up ready.
No, I get
So there's
that.
a lot of incentives there, but when I don't want to do it, there's a healthy compromise that sometimes has to be made.
Well, for me, right, I showed up having practiced a song a little bit wrong, and then I was not able to incentivize myself to do the others, and I probably would have not remembered them. But the compromise was like, well, I know I'll be there. This is the guy who wrote them, so I do it. We always have fun. We'll figure it out. And I had the faith in myself that, yeah, you'll figure it out. I'm not, I didn't lose a finger. I didn't have a traumatic brain injury. We had ran these things many times and put a lot of effort into it. It's in the muscle memory. So I had a little bit of faith, was also part of what the compromise was. But again, instead, you're talking about rehearsing incentive. Like I can noodle because I want to hear a sound, right? I want to play this lick again and again and again. But actually, rigidly running structured songs again and again, the most the time that's enjoyable again is when I'm doing it with other folks, and the goal is it's fun. It's not I've been with practices that suck. Like that's 100% possible, and it's particularly when folks aren't their heart's not in it, and that's always been a thing for me. Is what anytime I'm going to do any kind of expressive work, art, whatever I try very much to throw my whole heart into it because that's how I find value in it, right? Like if
you're gonna show up,
show up. Exactly. I don't feel like sometimes I'm rough. Like last week, it was rough. It was the last stream. It was my first week back. To maybe my second week back at work, and then it was the first week back at work. I was beat up. I had busted my knee. There's all these different things going on, and it's just like, well, no, I'm showing up, doing my best I can, and we got something out of it. We had a great talk, a great pre-show that you can see some clips on the channel from this wonderful gentleman's half of the dialogue, but there were many technical mistakes from somebody who really needed more sleep. This time I was able to do it. I was out at work early and all these other things that allowed it to be a wonderful experience.
And so like us doing this podcast together,
yes,
we're in a partnership.
Yes,
and that requires compromise.
Oh, that's a big one. That's a big one. Absolutely.
And I feel that we've done well thus far.
I agree. At the beginning of this too, just trying to figure out, came out with some kind of visual identity. You have to come out with branding, right? You have to figure out how you're going to do it, what the topics are, or in terms of what the general concept of the project is, right?
Yeah.
What not the rigid structure, but I'm still going to use the term the structure.
Yeah.
You have to figure those things out. Framework. And that again, any collaborative art, that is where I find the most joy in it, is because I love not being on my own in an expressive art. In terms of I always find so much more value that I couldn't have even imagined to those expressions through that compromise. Right? I've never released a comic that I didn't find so much better than the script I wrote. because of all these different efforts that went into it and the shape it took with these other folks throwing their heart and their hard work and their sometimes little blood, sweat, tears, ink,
Yeah.
your music, all these different aspects of it, the wonderful folks who have supported and shared my work, those interactions, those compromises in terms of like, here's a thing that I made that you like, and so this is a how we'll talk about these things, and I'll try and give that respect, and all those wonderful things that only occur because of, again, compromise. There are things I don't compromise on, but those are the things I find the
Yes.
most value. Um,
Well, and when I
Usually
recorded,
adaptable.
right, and when I recorded Chuck, I wanted other people involved, and I needed other people involved to fulfill roles that I couldn't do.
Yep.
I needed people to play characters. I needed people to do this and that. And I compromised where I felt comfortable. And when I didn't, I'd be like, okay, well, that's not going to work. We'll get somebody else to do that. This can't stay like that. Try it this way. And I think I've always enjoyed working with other people, but I've had some pretty negative experiences with it.
That'll sour it real quick.
And, and so I, I, I think it's just been, I think it's kind of, the village the village was getting too crazy, so I went off into the mountains and
As many smart people do.
I did that secluded thing where I just kind of worked on my and I would be, hey, come visit me in my mountain lair and check this
Yes.
out, and maybe you can help me out with this. But the village, nah, forget about that. And so now I think as I continue to work and I continue to try to find the right people to work with. That's the real trick, finding the right people to work with.
Oh, so
I
tough.
think I think I'm more willing to compromise because I've seen the fruits of the labor of multiple people, and I've seen the fruits of proper compromise.
Yes.
And so I have a better understanding of it now. And I'm more reasonable than I used to be, and I'm working with more reasonable people.
That's also, I mean, that's a bit too. Again, I've been very blessed. I've had few negative encounters in my work, few, much less than many. I've heard so many horror stories of folks either being too nice or too rigid or being taken advantage of in one form or another. It's usually around finances. That's usually where everything breaks down in compromise. Is when money comes involved. So I try very hard for that not to be a massive factor on my end. Be nice. I'd like some money here and there, but for me, the main bit is getting the work. That's my like where I find the greatest value of doing it in the first place is it, um, and so that's allowed me to survive a lot of circumstances that many other creators simply can't because they can't make that compromise. And that's
Mhm.
totally completely reasonable. A lot of people, you got rent to pay. You've got all these different, survival things that you want your work to help prop up. That I've been lucky enough that, yes, I would love it to prop it up. I'd be a much happier, healthier individual if that wasn't always in the back of my mind. But at the same time, if that was the focus of my work, then I would be even worse off than I am in terms mentally,
Yeah.
right? Like if that's what I was doing it for, I couldn't do it. The biggest compromise I made to this day to get this work done was jumping on social media. I never wanted to deal with this mess, and I will say that in YouTube as well. I never wanted to deal with the internet mess. A very secluded individual. I never found too much value in it. There's media I consume that I enjoy on it. Everybody's tends to have that, but I did not want to face the very often fake and nasty face of facade of humanity that's put through the fiber optics and the airwaves, right? I didn't want that in my life. But
Yeah.
I looked at my work and I looked at my reality and I had to figure out a way to get the work done. And that was a compromise that I looked at and I was like, well, you actually don't know how bad it's going to be. You have an idea of what it could be at its worst. And could you survive that? And I thought it over. And I was like, well, it's likely not going to get that bad. And I don't want to be on social media, but I need to get this work out there. And that was all it took. And I just took time, adapted, listened, and found that I could play that game my way. And that's all I needed. And that's allowed me to survive
Yeah,
it and get my work done.
I would argue you played it well.
I've tried. I've done very well compared to a lot of folks, and I've done worse than others. Everybody can usually say that about something, but
Right.
it's I've never gotten in massive tiffs. There's that's one of the places I compromise. When somebody's spewing bullshit that everybody's spewing about, and it's something I may even resonate with it. I may even believe that whatever this is going on, but do I want that to be part of my brand? Do I want that to be part of how I interact with the folks who honestly want to interact with my work and me? Do I want that to be part of the sphere that I'm creating? Well, no. So it's not worth it.
These are important considerations to make.
I think so. It's allowed me to survive it. Again, it was something I was terrified of, but I was so much more terrified of not ever getting to express this work that was so important to me. And it took a shape that I never could have really expected, and something's far, far more valuable than I had originally imagined it being. And that's self rewarding. Talk about building confidence and just being a self-rewarding compromise. That was one where I found peace, making peace with my art and compromising a different part of myself that I maybe had built up to be a bigger boogeyman than it. I mean, it could be terrible, but then it has been was it was a great decision for me.
Yeah, I would agree. And something you've made me think of that I'd like to mention about compromise is that I don't think people should always compromise in their art.
Oh no.
And I know you know that we shouldn't always compromise. But if it reaches a point where, due to your lack of compromise, the art will be compromised, that's a problem.
Yes.
That's when things need to change. And that's sort of the realization I had after I put out Chuck, is that as far as what I can record and produce, I've really hit the ceiling. Like, I just don't have first off, I don't have the know-how, and I don't have the next level of tools. I started with like 4-track tape recorders, and I've moved up, and I've learned a little bit as I've gone, and I've kind of grown along with my skills and my tools. Now, the tools I have aren't going to get me to the next level, so I would be compromising the art if I didn't try to bring other people in, or go to other people and help them, or help get their help to elevate the art to where it needs to be. So that's an important thing to realize. Just figure out when, try to notice when you're getting in your own way.
That's something I think we only figure out with experience, getting in our own way enough times to the fact point
Hmm.
that we can recognize the signs when it's beginning, and that it's kind of been rubbed in our face enough to know that we don't like it. Um, and that's taking time. It just takes time. It's one of the gifts. There's going to be many, 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 many more opportunities for positive learning compromise throughout your life, and you got to have faith that you'll survive those compromises and even the negative ones. That's a big one for me. That's my uh, we're talking about the relationship between incentive and compromise. I mean, getting out of bed and doing stuff every day. you got to find your ways, your incentives to compromise with the fact that maybe your body doesn't want to get up, maybe
Yeah.
whatever's going on, you had a terrible night and nightmares all night, whatever. You have to find your incentives, and just to get it through a day,
And
through a year, through a month, through however amount of time. For me, one of my biggest compromises again is just having faith in the journey is going to lead me to whatever I need to know. Not perhaps what I want, but maybe what I need. Well, definitely what I
right. And that's what and you need what you want typically, or you want what you need typically. uh I was gonna say this this line of thinking and some other things that we said before has given me an idea for what our next topic of discussion should be.
Oh,
And I think a good one to tackle would be discipline.
oh God, yeah. That is a great one to tackle. Yeah, a lot to say on discipline. Not a lot to
because
show for it.
because as independent artists, there has to be a degree of discipline. And
That's the one.
and just like you said, getting out of bed in the morning,
Yep,
that sort of thing,
yep, 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 yep.
If there's this is the thing, and I don't and I'll say this, and I won't speak more on discipline because I
Yeah.
don't want to give too much away, but this is the thing I'll say about it. When you have a job and you have a boss, if you don't show up to work, your boss is going to call you and be like, "Where the hell are you? You're supposed to be at work." And that might, oh my God, I'm sorry I'm late or whatever. And but there's this outside force pulling you to go to work, right? And
Yes.
maybe you need the money. Obviously, that's another factor. But when you're working for yourself, when you're creating, when you're writing comic books, when you're writing music, you are the boss and the employee. You have to call yourself when you don't show up for work. You have to hold yourself responsible, and you have to show up for you and only you. And if you're lucky, maybe the people in your life will keep you going and keep you pushing towards your goals. So
I like it.
that's the thing.
So look
That's a
forward
tricky thing.
in about 2 weeks from today. We will be discussing discipline. That kind of made me think, though, is the relationship between compromise and responsibility, which will also probably bleed into discipline on the next podcast. But I think a lot of compromise does exist because of that social duty to improve a situation, just being a part of it.
Interesting.
And I think a lot of compromise comes from that in both negative and positives. That you're there, so you want to do something good. You want to be liked, or you want to so you want to bring something good, or you want you want to show them that they're liked. Um, there I think that's a lot of compromise. That's one of the main incentives is responsibility.
I have a poem on that if you'd like to hear it.
Oh, cool, 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 cool.
I wrote this back in June 25th. When one's plate is full, there should be a feast, but our stomachs are easily turned. One can gorge on expectations, not leaving room for responsibilities.
All right. Well,
I don't know if you've experienced that, but that's something like I've definitely experienced where there are things you have to do in your life, and then you get these people who expect you to just show up at the drop of a dime, or they just expect you to always say yes, and then your responsibilities just get cast to the side because you're so focused on those expectations.
mm. See, I saw I kind of heard the poem a little differently. I kind of had
Good.
heard the expectation in it as that desire, that imaginary fulfillment, pre-fulfillment of that gorging of the food as something that can blind you to your responsibilities, to your ability to share that full plate.
Yeah, that is also true.
Yeah, that's kind of how I read that. Is just and 100%. I can self-absorption will blind someone to responsibility, will blind someone to compromise. Absolutely.
Or martyrdom.
Oh, absolutely. Also, yes, yes, yes. Throwing
You
yourselves
know,
out, yeah, to yourself, your responsibility to yourself.
it's like
Absolutely.
I've got these problems I don't want to deal with. Uh, I'll focus on that. You know,
Hmm.
and that could be applied to art too,
Yes.
because we have a responsibility to our art that our expectations may distract us. You know, we're so busy trying to fulfill these expectations that we don't actually fulfill our responsibility. You know, I- if you're this is an example. Cody, let's say you're writing your next comic book and you know it's supposed to go this way. You have your outline, you have your story, you have your beats. This is how the story is supposed to be. But what does the audience expect?
I've had to do
You
that one.
know? What would sell? What would sell? I expect this comic to be the best-selling comic I've ever made. So how do I make it that? Well, I could change this part of the story. I could add this. That'd be a little more appealing.
Yep.
You know, I could take that out. I could add that in, you know?
I've had
Before
that
you know it.
discussion with quite a few other creatives. That's one of the main points for me. And again, for me, it's having a very clear idea of what you won't compromise on.
Yeah.
I know what this art is, and I know what it, not what it can be. I want to find out what it can be, but I
Yeah.
know what its soul is. What's that immutable spark of ignition that is why it is. I know what that is, and so you twist and turn that too much. Is that? But I've had to learn as I go. You know, when people look at a certain character design, they expect something very specific from that story, right?
Sure.
Or if they're even just picking up a comic book in general, they kind of expect something this way, right? One of the beautiful things about the medium is it has so much room to throw those expectations out and actually reward you for sticking with it. It's a wonderful medium for that, but there's been a little too much of that in a non-rewarding fashion for a lot of folks, so it's become a difficult market because it's become very self-absorbed would be a wonderful term to describe the comic book industry.
Yeah,
And
and you could apply it to a lot of like you could apply it to movies too.
as
Like
well,
this
music
this could
too.
have been this subversive or whatever you want it to be.
Yeah.
It could have been this spiritually enlightened or this subversive epic that reached the hearts of millions subconsciously. You know, I don't know what it is about that movie. I just got to go see it again. There's
Uh-huh.
something there. That movie gets turned into a popcorn movie
Yep.
where all the substance is just sapped out of it. And then, oh, it's a, we were talking about, I was having this conversation just the other day. Guys, it's like been 5 minutes since there's been a joke. So put a joke
Oh
in this
God.
scene because just we need got to keep that humor
Yeah.
rolling. And this guy's maybe trying to make some esoteric, uh, cryptic movie, and then they're throwing in fart jokes for the 13-year-olds, and it just becomes this victim of expectations, instead of this love effort of responsibility.
Yep. No, and that's it. It is pervasive through any medium that has a need for large amounts of cash, which is most art mediums, but movies in particular suffer very hard from it. Video games as well. But video games, luckily, have had enough freedom to them. And I mean, there are so many solo developers that create amazing, immaculate pieces of artwork through gaming. Um,
Yeah.
that they did compromise because they had to learn these different systems and they had to do all these different things to fulfill the idea or the ignition point, again, that soul of it. But since it was them and they didn't answer to anybody else and it was their, again, we'll talk about it during discipline, I'm sure, it was that rigidity and need to put something out that kept the soul there and allowed it to become what it needed to become, which I would say nearly any piece of art, it doesn't survive the ideal concept. Of course, it's not the perfect thing because honestly, we never imagine the perfect thing. We just think it's going to be this way, and then you
I don't
boots
know,
on the
man.
ground.
I feel like it's the opposite. I imagine it perfect, and then I get my little flesh and blood involved and
Uh-huh.
my corporeal being, and then I just mess it up, and then it just comes out as good as it's gonna be. But in my head, in this
Uh-huh.
ethereal, in the ether, it's just this. Oh, it's perfection. It's beautiful. But as soon as you get your grubby little paws on it, because we're such crude beings, there's only so much we can do.
No, that's funny. No, I totally. I just see it as another way. It doesn't exist without that flesh. So, like to me,
Right.
it's
Well,
not
that's how we bring it
forged.
into
You know,
existence.
it's the to me even the ideal is just the ore. It's not even the metal yet.
Right.
And again, it was I think it's either Michelangelo or Raphael, and not the turtles. That said, the sculpture was always there. I just removed the extra bits.
I
Right.
believe that's Michelangelo.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
he just revealed it.
that was it. Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so to me that process, that relationship between the ideal and reality, uh, uh, art is the perfect expression of that relationship.
And it's a tricky relationship.
Oh, absolutely. My God, so many different
Oh,
moving cogs.
I have some different thoughts about compromise because I thought about this. I just thought about, oh, if you compromised for too long, eventually it would just build up and it would just turn into this. The pendulum would swing the other way, and you would just refuse to compromise even on small things. Do you know what I mean?
I do, and I think that could occur to some people. I do think there are some wonderful, I can almost say eternal compromises, particularly within very interpersonal, loving relationships.
Oh, and
Um,
I'm talking about art specifically when I say
oh,
it,
okay. Yeah.
and expression.
Say
But
it again, because
oh well,
it brought me
essentially,
to that other bit.
it's just the idea of like compromising just repeatedly
Mm,
to where it gets just this all these things that you had to give up. They start forming this wall of water, this huge tidal wave, and the dam can only hold it back so long, and eventually all these compromises are just going to come flooding over. And and I was thinking about that, and I was like, well, that could be a very positive thing because it could flood over and wash over you in this wave of inspiration, you know.
hmm
And I think it could go well and it could go badly. And one thing I'm thinking of is just if you're a person who maybe felt like they had to compromise their honesty, um because like for you, you're on social media. I'm sure there's a lot of times where it's difficult to be honest. I know I have that problem.
Yeah, I
um
tend to just not interact. That's
right,
my bit.
exactly, just
It's
shut
like,
up, you don't got right.
yeah, again, it's how much value does this interaction actually provide me? I always guide on that because how much time do we actually have? And it's always ticking away.
Right.
But at the
Yeah.
same time, again, there's some things I can't. There's things very very particular that I have to be honest about. And there's the
Right.
social performance that you could call it, right? That isn't a
That's a good
hundred
way to say
percent
it.
authentic, but it
Right.
also isn't a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's that compromise. It's that grease, right? It
It's
allows, it
it's yeah,
smoothens things a little bit.
it's that acceptable mask.
Yeah, and and that's 100%. Again, as we've been kind of saying, it's been key to the survival of humanity as a social species.
Right.
It's very
But
necessary.
let me finish this point
Yeah.
is so like let's say you've compromised a bunch and then this tidal wave rushes over you, and then you're like, well, I'm not going to compromise anymore. I'm going to say this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to utilize all these things that I've locked away, and I'm going to create something with them. Like this is the new everything that I didn't get to do before. Now I will do, right? And I think
Yeah.
that could be a very good thing.
Oh, absolutely.
But I can think it'd be a bad thing, i.e., Star Wars the special editions, right?
I get you. Yeah.
George Lucas had to compromise consistently because he didn't have the technology wasn't there to fulfill his initial vision, right?
Well, you say that, and like, how
That's what he
much
said.
Well, okay, he said that, but how much is like, oh, here's new shiny tech. I have an idea how to use that tech in something I already did that would make it better, in my opinion.
Right. But what I'm saying is like
It
that
certainly sounds,
supposedly he compromised in the
uh,
past, and then this was like him like this is what I
righting
always
his
wanted it to be.
wrongs.
Right. This
Yeah.
is what it was always supposed to be, you
Uh,
know? And so I think that's when this surplus of compromise it can go negatively
well,
when it finally breaks through.
I have another one too where it doesn't break through, right? And you're just use the parable of the ship of Theseus. You just keep replacing so many parts that you don't even recognize it at the end of it, and you completely just like it's lost forever because you compromise so much. And then there's no going back or forward, right? It's just like it's dead because you just kept Frankensteining the thing out of different pieces until it
Just turns
was
into nothing.
eventually it was a piece of a soul each time until that soul was gone and extinguished forever.
Ugh.
That and there is no there is no flood behind it. There's no energy behind it. It went from life to a corpse, right? Um,
Yeah, how many times can you take yourself apart and remake yourself?
well, every day, hopefully, but more metaphorically. But in terms of like
Well,
completely and whole, I
that's what I mean,
yeah,
not
that's
completely. Like, we all have to
no.
chisel off pieces of ourselves that well, that's a little rough hewn.
Yep,
Let's clean that up.
yeah,
Oh, this could be good. Let's pack that on, you know?
yep.
That's just growth, is shedding and growing, and,
Yeah, I'd argue
yeah.
you could never completely remake yourself, and if you try and pursue that, it's very unhealthy.
I don't even yeah, I don't think
You have
that's
to
the
have
thing.
you have to have a footing, and I know people. I mean, there's a lot of very rough mental states to be in, and I can see a desire to escape that manifesting in as many ways as the human imagination can come up with, right? And so that it's a brave thing to take the risk and do it, but at the same time, it is that's one of those things that you have to be very careful of how much you're compromising and
Right,
why. That's the
and
other big one.
how much of what you're trying to change is actually for yourself, for your own
Yes.
good,
Yep.
or is it for how you want people to perceive you?
Yep. Yeah.
How you want to be perceived. If I pretend to be this way and act as though I'm this, I will be seen as such. That's the unhealthy, I would argue. But if you're a person who's like, I have problems with this and that, and every day I'm gonna just work on this a little bit more,
Yes.
and that's just and that's the art of life.
Yep.
We're a sculpture in constant flux. You know, we can change things, we can move things, we can alter, we can build onto, we can break down, you know. But I think the impulse behind it, and we've talked about this in desire, the desire behind the art is vitally important.
Oh, absolutely. And I think behind all art, not every piece of art, but I think it's a little bit when you're trying to bring something internal, a concept, an idea, a visual, a sound, an experience, all these different mediums and expressions of what we determine as art. When you're trying to bring something internal, that original idea, that ignition point, to something external, at the very least you want it to be seen. Now it doesn't have to be seen by others. It can just be for you, but it's still a an attempt to explore that. And I think nearly any form of that can be very, very, very healthy compared to a few of the other things we were talking about.
Yeah, I agree.
But so we're
Um,
hitting an hour 25 or so now.
yeah,
Do we want to get to some closing thoughts on compromise and all the other good
definitely,
stuff?
definitely. Yeah, yeah, that sounds good.
All right.
Do you want to go first?
Sure, why not? So I think compromise again, and throughout this we've talked about it. I think it is a amazing tool. I think it does significantly more good than bad, particularly because a lot of it is very gentle. But at the same time, it's one that you need to understand and that you only really understand through experience, and that's a rough thing. Nearly anything we talk about that you know can only really get to any kind of grips on with experience, it's going to be rough. Experience is rough. Time is hard, but compromising yourself by ignoring these things, compromising to society too much, compromising too much is probably not healthy unless you are going from a place of no compromise, which again is very, very rough position to. It's a very lucky position to be able to get away with that. I can't think of a social situation where that would work, but nonetheless, I think it's important. Like everything we talk about on To Walk with Giants, I think it's an important thing to explore, to think about, and I cannot wait to hear you wonderful folks watching this who got this far through our collective rambling. I want to hear your thoughts on compromise, and thank you so much for taking your time and listening to us.
Yes, and yeah, just to close out on compromise, it's a tool that has value, and just like anything, if overused, it can be a problem, and if underused, you can really miss out on valuable relationships with others and also with whatever it is you're working on, whether it be art, a job, whatever it is. There's a place for compromise, and is specifically with art, because that's what I can speak to. Know what you're willing to compromise and what you're not willing to compromise, and stick to it. Because if you compromise something that you know you shouldn't, it's going to haunt you, it's going to bother you, it's going to be tough to shake that feeling. And know when to compromise also, because I think if you can just walk blindly and keep doing, like, I could keep recording albums at home and they would be of a certain quality and that would be fine. But if I wasn't actually thinking and if I wasn't realizing what a compromise that was, I wouldn't be opening myself to more potentials and more possibilities through compromise. So recognize the opportunities for compromise, and take them if they don't destroy the core of what you're working on.
Yeah, it seems to, and I didn't phrase it too well throughout it, but it seems like the who, what, when, where, why, and how are very important for compromise. Every one of those aspects lend it credence and lend it value and lend it its power. It's what allows it to do its good. So you try and figure out what that is. If you're having a problem with some form of compromise you're making, break it down into those and you'll at least understand it and see perhaps a path forward through it. But again, I want to thank folks for joining us this Christmas Eve. Happy
Yes, thank
holidays.
you.
Thank you
Merry
so
Christmas.
much. I hope you have a wonderful day tomorrow and for the rest of your lives, if you would. And yeah, we will catch you in a couple weeks with Discipline. I'm Cody Fernandez with Ironverse Comics and To Walk with Giants.
I'm Christopher Messick, Laguna Moonta musically. And if you want to check out my music, you can check it out for free on Bandcamp. And Cody, where can they get your comic books?
Surprisingly, ironversecomics.com. It's kind of crazy.
There you
So
go.
yeah, check that out. It's all free. Read it, enjoy it. See if it's got some value to you. Thank you again so much, folks, and we will catch you later. And we surely hope you will walk with us again. Take care, folks.